The International Court of Justice is the judicial arm of the United Nations. It was set up after World War II, particularly to deal with problems with respect to genocide, ethnic cleansing, and other war crimes. It's a series of judges that are appointed from various countries around the world. They meet in The Hague in the International Court, and they investigate and hold hearings. So far to date, to the best of my knowledge, most of the trials have been against uh, African dictators. For whatever reason, they don't seem to go after white folks as often. There's been exceptions, I believe, with respect to the Balkans and several war crimes with respect to Serbia. However, recently they've charged Israel, or at least Netanyahu and his defense minister, and they've suggested that they are committing war crimes and genocide.
Have they charged any Russians? Like
Yes,
Putin's been charged
yes.
through there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No, they charged Putin for allegedly removing children away from the front. The Russians say that they were moving children out of harm's way. The Ukrainians said that they were stealing them and turning them into Russians. So it's
Okay, for
you
our
know
audience, I would like to probably understand who appoints the judges and the investigators to the ICC.
that's a good question. I think United Nations has a selection criteria that appoints
So
judges
there's
and
vetting.
prosecutors.
They vet the
And
people
and
for
I'm not
qualifications.
100% I'm not 100% sure how it works, although I do know a
Does it a
gentleman
vote
who
at the UN then as to they have to qualify and then be voted into position?
I'd have to look that up. I'm not 100% sure how they get that position, although they do come from various countries around the world. There's a panel,
Yeah.
and so there's a broad representation of individuals from all around the world who I gather at one time were judges in their own home countries. How they
Right.
get there, I'm not 100% sure.
So
But what I
my
do know is the United States and the Soviet Union, as well as in Israel, are not signatories to the court. In other
yes.
words, they do not want the court to be adjudicating against their civilians. And the Americans actually have a law that says anybody that goes after an American citizen is declaring war on the U.S. and they can send in special forces to rescue them. So it's an
Well,
interesting.
that brings up an interesting question. And that question to me is the UN a democratic body where they have a judicial system at arm's length, as all other democratic processes have that are independent once appointed or duly appointed with the criteria to act in that capacity? And if that is the case, that they are representing a democratic structure, how is it that we are dealing with people that do not want to partake in the ICC or the courts? And that, I think, is sanctionable in and of itself, that the countries of the world that are participating in the ICC authority should be banning and restricting business to those that refuse to have world laws imposed for the safety of people around the world. That's a big issue to me, and I think we're going to see in our discussion today that why you do need to have rule of law on a world scale, and the flaunting of or ignoring of the legal structure is a detriment to the world and to every country that does participate in it. So from that point of view, I'd like to maybe defer to you on the latest Rubio postings.
Well, Rubio is showing himself to be one of the biggest clowns on the Trump clown car. His latest move is to, and you got to admit, the pictures of him are fantastic. He's got ears like his mother was dragging him around by them his entire life, and he's such a suckhole to Trump. It's unbelievable. Considering that at one time they were calling each other names, now they're the best of buds, and it just goes to show you that power corrupts absolutely. But
And money. He's got to
yes,
be, he's making lots of money from capitulating and siding with his felon leader.
so the most recent one is the United States has placed sanctions on a Canadian judge and three other judges who sit on the International Criminal Court, saying they authorize ICC investigations into U.S. personnel in Afghanistan. So the
Wow.
authorization of an investigation is enough to draw a sanction from the U.S., which goes to show you, I think, two things. One is the Americans are afraid that the investigation will show that it's worthy of sanctions. And second of all, that they'll do anything in their power to stop even the investigation of wrongdoing. It's interesting that they would actually attack Canadians as well, but you're a judge, you're open to attack from the U.S.
Well,
Now,
there was also some members of the ICC resigned as a result of this sanction. They resigned their positions in the investigations with ICC. I think there was three or four. And they also go on to Albanese is July 9th, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio imposed sanctions on UN Special Rapporteur Francesca Albanese. Has used her platform in the United Nations to relentlessly attack Israel and wage economic warfare against U.S. companies. Sanctions that reverberations through other UN bodies are weaponizing international law to fuel illegitimate investigations focusing on the U.S. and Israelis. Now, I don't think there's an abuse of power because the whole world sees the genocide and the criminal acts conducted by U.S. and the Israelis in Gaza. So if you are sanctioning and trying to threaten or scare people from participating in judging or investigating crimes on an international scale, it is very similar to what went on when Trump was being investigated for federal charges and lawsuits, and there were threats made to these judges, and all of a sudden you see the judges starting to make weird rulings and watered down rulings because of this implication. So is there financial pressure putting on these people by sanctions and implied threats? Are there, by pointing out who these people are the radicals targeting these people? Like some of the judges in the U.S. were really scared for their lives because there was personal threats against them and their families. Is this action by Rubio and Trump ultimately being used to silence investigations on an international level? And why is the democratic countries of the free world allowing such actions and intimidations to be conducted at this level? Do you have any revelations on those
well,
statements I just made?
one of the things you have to look at is what did Rubio say were the reasons for putting sanctions on the judges at the International Court of Justice. What he says is that they were directly engaged in efforts to investigate, arrest, detain, or prosecute nationals of the United States or Israel without the consent of either nation. To which the question should be, why wouldn't you consent? Like, if you've done nothing wrong, then
Oh,
you would think, well, investigate if you want. I don't care. We've done nothing wrong. But instead, they go, oh, we're going to try to stop this investigation before it goes anywhere and stop future investigations as well. And he says that the ICC has politicized and abused its power, as well as disregard for U.S. national sovereignty and illegitimate judicial overreach. Now, the U.S. isn't a party to the ICC, so they really don't have any sovereignty over the International Court. So how can a court have abused its power against the U.S. sovereignty if they're not a member? And so the question becomes, what are they afraid of? And they're afraid of the truth. The truth is the Americans are complicit with the Israelis in genocide. and they don't want anybody to make a public statement from a place of authority. You asked about how people get appointed. The Canadian judge had previously served with the Canadian Department of Justice, and he was the chief of the cabinet for the president of the International Court of Justice for a 2-year term before being assigned as a judge. So the gentleman is obviously very familiar with legal procedure and probably quite qualified.
Yeah. When they're attacking these judges, what are the implications to future judges coming to want to sit on the court?
Well, here's the other thing too. He claims that the court is a national security threat that has become an instrument of warfare against the United States and its close ally, Israel.
Well, of
How?
course. I mean, you've got a felon running your country. You have no regard for international law, and you have no regard for law within your own country, where you're imposing threats and implied threats on judges that ever try to investigate or have a case heard before them against your felon leader, who has probably a record number of cases and has been given immunity from the Supreme Court, saying he can do whatever he wants as long as he's sitting as president. So he can go around the world doing whatever he wants. And I know why he likes Israel. The legal age of consent is 16 years old for both boys and girls. So he can go to Israel probably in his younger days and have no worries of prosecution. And in Israel, they even allow a 3-year separation in age, such to lower the age of consent to 14, where a 17-year-old can have sex with a 14-year-old and it's constituted as legal. There was a Israeli opposition far-right lawmaker, Avi Maoz, M-A-O-Z, accused the Justice Ministry of trying to normalize pedophilia within the country by altering Israelis' age of consent. And what he was referring to is they want to make it so that there's a 5-year age difference so that a 14-year-old could have sex with a 19-year-old. And that is what the Israelis have before their judicial system, according to this article, May 2nd, 2023, in the Jerusalem Post. Now, this pedophilia goes back to the Epstein files, and we know there was a lot of international connections. So how deep does that go? And I guess the Epstein files would have a lot of that information in, and one of the only means of really tracking is where did the money go and who was traveling just before, in and around that time the money is transferred through Epstein's accounts, because most kingpins of crime would have a front man doing all the dirty work. And I'm suggesting that whoever the kingpin was of the pedophilia ring in the United States was associated to the pedophilia ring of the fashion shows by the convicted pedophile in France. And they had met years earlier in France, and lo and behold, all of a sudden buying a teenage pageant show. And that I'll leave for other people to draw the conjectures and the information that can be found on that subject. So we can get back to why these people want to avoid international courts. It's because they can hide behind making laws in their own countries, period.
Well, you can commit genocide and ethnic cleansing and be immune. That's as simple as that. But the Israeli official that recently got busted, Tom Alexandrovich, was in Nevada. He got caught in a ring with 8 other people, an undercover sting that was looking for people targeting child sex predators, basically. And
he was soliciting a 15-year-old girl.
Well, yes, he was. Now he was released, and of course fled back to Israel. The State Department, and you know who the clowns that are running that one. The State Department, yeah, that wouldn't
Trump.
be Rubio, the Rube, Secretary of State.
All this guy had to do was post a $10,000 bond, and they released him, and that's just a slap in the face. So this sexual predator only has to produce a 10,000 bond with 100% risk of flight
Fleet.
from the country. And
No,
they think, oh, well, that's great. We'll just let him go. And he's immune in Israel because he's not part of the ICC, Israel isn't. So he gets away scot-free. Nice pat in the back, and Trump's happy that he didn't get his associate from Israel charged. And you got to remember, Israel's killed like 19,000 children by estimates in Gaza war as strikes intensify. And that's in the same news article that I'm reading from Al Jazeera by Ali Harb about this pedophile being allowed to leave, and they're mocking that 19,000 children were killed in Gaza. Well, that $10,000 bond is a peanuts to the level of money these people have, and it sure smells fishy when somebody is let go where you know he's going to Israel and will never return. That is pathetic. That is a pedophile-backed government hiding and covering pedophilia across the United States. And that's why it's so important to have these FBI investigations released to the public so they know the painting's on the wall. They know exactly. You might not be charged, and you might have the money to prevent being charged, but there is no doubt of involvement once the files are released. And redaction should not be allowed if you're going to release the papers, because redacting only shows your guilt, not your innocence. Redacting your name shows your guilt, Trump. So release it with your name exposed, or we know you're guilty as hell. Now, we should get back to the international court issue, I guess, because it's
here's what their mandate is. The International Court was established in 2002 to prosecute genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes against countries. That is their purpose. Now, according to what I'm reading here, Israel's dropped over 100,000 tons of explosives over Gaza, wiped out 2,200 families, and that's just a part of the at least 60,000 people that they've killed. At some point, you have to either redefine what genocide is, or define what crimes against humanity is, because obviously, by any normal definition, this is a crime against humanity. It's ethnic cleansing, and they're shooting kids. They're shooting people lining up for food that they're starving. They're cutting off medical services for children who have been injured to come into the United States, and imposing sanctions on the charities that are trying to bring the children in, canceling the visas, and it's absolutely criminal what they're doing. And
they're
the thing is,
they're blaming these people for looking to prosecute these crimes, claiming it's lawfare. It's a lawfare industry.
Yeah.
Bullshit. It's you guys trying to paint it like you're above the laws, and these people shouldn't have the right to investigate you because it's just used as a political tool against you. How the hell is law a political tool? Oh yeah, let me redefine that. Democracy is electing people to represent you. And the checks and balance of all democracy is having an independent judicial system that is not influenced by money or the elected politicians, other than the initial appointing of these individuals through criteria to be appointed. And when that principle of independent law is taken out of the equation of a pseudo-democracy, then you have no democracy, you have fascism. And that is what's going on in the United States, and they want to impose that fascism to the UN as well, and have been very successful in making the UN a fascist body versus a democratic body because of the non-participation in the international law and the ICC. So if you want to truly have a democratic UN, you have to have laws that everybody has to abide by. No exemptions. And you cannot allow people to claim that these are law warfare when you're being investigated on an international level for crimes to which you definitely look like you've participated in or had a hand in. Those need to be investigated and brought before tribunals and courts to be prosecuted. And the minute you claim law warfare, you are undermining the rule of law, and that shows you are a criminal and with criminal intent to ensure that you never get prosecuted.
Another point is too that not everybody is appalled by these sanctions. There's a group out here in the internet that calls themselves the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Now that
Yeah,
sounds like a nice euphemism for people that are concerned about democratic
gaslighting.
rights and freedom and all that kind of thing. But when you read the headline that they have on their website, Marco Rubio fights lawfare with sanctions and wins. Uh, a UN
Yeah,
official is getting her due for prosecuting Israel and the United States using a bogus international court system, and she won't be the last, right?
yeah, I
And
was looking at that same article right now and just appalled at it. Like trying to legitimize attacking ICC judges and throwing sanctions on them to protect a known felon named Donald Trump. I mean, this felon is just a felon. He's a criminal mastermind that uses money and his influential friends to get away from being prosecuted. He has for decades. This person should have been jailed, not president of the United States. But it shows the people of the United States value. They wanted this convict to run the U.S. because they love the fact that maybe they won't have to go to jail if they commit crimes because Trump never had to. But folks, it's a two-tiered legal system. There's the peons that if you smoke a joint, you go to jail for life in certain states. And there's the rest of the rich people, which is the 1% of the population, never has to face crime charges unless they pissed off another 1%er who's got more money. Then they go to jail. And that's it. It's money, power, and influence determine your outcome in a court case. I mean, look at some of this white trash that raped girls and they get 6 months for raping and brutalizing women just because they're white. And there's case after case after case in the U.S. like that. And that's why you've got an alleged pedophile associate running the country, and he's probably been accused 26 times of sexual assault, and some of those were with minors. So what does that make him? Now, if it was truly a legal system in the U.S., all they have to do is bring those people, those 26 women that accused Trump of sexual assault, compel them in a grand jury to give testimony under oath as to the extent of Trump's involvement in the sexual conduct. And that testimony to the grand jury, although can never be made public, it can be handed to prosecutors to prosecute the violations of the law. And why isn't that being done? Why on earth isn't the justice system doing that? Oh, it's because the Republican Party controls the Senate and the House. So they will not allow a grand jury to be set up to question the people that have been forced to sign a non-disclosure agreement with Trump to avoid the wrath of his legal department harassing them for the rest of their lives. So of course these people disappear. And you know that poor employee that got into the sex ring and committed suicide. I mean, can you imagine the pressure somebody has on them when you're being victimized by the people of the United States electing an associate of the person that put you into a sex traffic ring? And there's ties to Trump being involved in that. So of course it puts a person that is a victim of a sex ring under huge pressure. And this going to release the files and not release them. You're victimizing the victims, people. And that has to stop because the perps should be brought to justice, and that includes Trump. He should be proven his innocence instead of buying silence by those accusers. And that means there's guilt when Trump pays money, because he don't pay money to people that even did work under contract to him. He stiffs them on the bill. So that's my take on that. Call a grand jury, nullify the non-disclosure agreements, get the information out to the people in power, and when they do their testimony under oath, send that information over to the FBI and get proper charges filed if there are wrongdoings. So that's my take on it.
So one of the things that should be kept in mind is, what are sanctions to begin with? Like what is a sanction, and why would anybody waste their time sanctioning somebody that doesn't even live in their own country? Like, seriously, when you look at sanctioning a Canadian judge that is in The Hague, what does that really mean? And what it means, their assets could get seized in the U.S.
Right,
if
so
they
if
have
they have
any.
stocks in U.S. companies, they can be seized even though they bought them in their home country. So it can impact them and impact them in all sorts of ways. If you have relatives in that country, you can't travel to see them. You'll have all sorts of other implications going from country to country with a sanction on you. And I guess it would depend on the security guard at the border as to the conduct you would get on any country, because there are Trump supporters everywhere in the world now. So
Here's the alleged four reasons or four types of sanctions. One is economic, another is international, a third is embargo, and the fourth is diplomatic. The purpose is to put pressure on countries that endanger the peace, implement harmful policies, or violate international law. So here, Rubio is Rubio is sanctioning an international court that's trying to enforce international law. So
saying that it's doing it illegally or not doing it right, or
they just do whatever the hell they want. They, it's almost like, I'm the wicked witch of the East. You're sanctioned. It really, like, don't you have better things to do?
We could get sanctioned and all sorts of shit doing this podcast. I mean, there was a lady spoke up against Gaza genocide, and she's been labeled a terrorist now just because she said what they're doing is genocide, and that can happen to us. And don't think for a minute that it can't. So if we piss off the wrong person by telling them they're a pedophile and a felon, we could be sanctioned, and we could be listed as international terrorists because we're saying Gaza is a genocide. You speak up, and they want you to be afraid to speak up, and that's one of their methods. That's fascism. If you're afraid to speak up, you have no voice.
So they had on the Office of the Foreign Asset Control in the U.S. They have a page of countries that have active sanctions, and it's an entire page, and it doesn't list half the countries, or fraction of the countries that have been sanctioned. When you think about the tariffs are a sanction, by additional tariffs on Canada for saying that you're going to recognize Palestine, that's not a tariff, it's a sanction. So
No.
so the litany of sanctions,
I
all
guess the
kinds
most
of
hypocrisy and blatant disregard for law would be when the U.S. Trump himself imposed a sanction on Brazil judge targeted by U.S. sanctions, confident of Trump reversal, is the name of the headline. And that was by Reuters. And that was a August 21st, 2025 article. And it goes on to say that the judge was the center of escalating tensions between Brazil and the United States, told Reuters he is counting on a change of heart from President Donald Trump to unwind sanctions against him, which he said lacked consensus within the U.S. government. well, I'd say bullshit. The U.S. government and Trump are one and the same because he controls the Senate and the House of Republic. And he put that sanction on this judge, folks, because this judge was hearing cases against his buddy that tried to overthrow the government in Brazil just at the same time Trump was trying to overthrow the government in the United States. And Trump doesn't like that fact, and Trump hit Brazilian goods with a 50% tariff, trying to bring them to their knees to say that this guy had the right to overthrow the government of Brazil, just the same as Trump had the right to overthrow the government of the U.S., and he did nothing illegal. And I call bullshit on that. We all seen it, Trump. You tried to overthrow the government, and just because your Senate and your House of Republicans were controlled by Republicans, you got away with basically murder and crimes. And that is the Republican Party doing that, and the world sees it. You can't hide that, and you can't taint our view and media like you can in the United States. Guilty as charged as far as I'm concerned, and you should be brought before a judge, and the international court should bring you before the courts to say no person should try to overthrow any state or country in the world, and you should be brought before the Hague for trying to overthrow a legitimate government.
See, the Americans want to be the world policeman, judge, and jury. The problem with that is they aren't very stable themselves. When you're putting armed, even unarmed, National Guard and soldiers into Washington D.C., claiming that there is some kind of national emergency, and the states that are contributing the troops happen to be Republican states. The ones that don't are Democratic states. It starts to sound a lot like the Civil War, where you had a division between the political aspirations of different states. They don't seem to be pulling together anymore. They seem to be pulling apart.
And money seems to be running the courts, and you can buy favor of judges. There's no justice system in the U.S. anymore, none whatsoever. And that's really appalling. The justice system has fallen apart, and it happens in Canada too now, because we follow their system. I don't know. You're getting me off on a rant here because it just irritates the shit out of me that justice is no justice. It's money buys the law, and we've fallen into that pattern even here in Canada, and it's shameful. And the minute you start attacking the only body that's trying to uphold justice in the world, which is the international courts, you're trying to undermine the rule of law in the world and in every country, and setting a precedent that all countries should be governed by a two-tiered justice system. The wealthy get all the favors, and any of their peons have to face a different set of rules and get whacked on the head as much as possible and thrown in jail. So, whack-a-mole. Oh, whack-a-felon it should be, but ain't gonna happen.
No, it's not going to happen. Now, there's 193 states that are members of the United Nations, and every year they have an overwhelming vote to lift the sanctions off of Cuba, and every year the Americans use their veto. And the veto power in the United Nations is one of the sticking points. In one sense, it provides balance, but in the other sense, it also allows one country to dominate.
It's not a democracy, and you cannot have an international body that's not a democratic process. That defeats the purpose of having a body. So disband the UN. Get rid of it. It's of no value the minute it's got veto power, and the minute a veto power country is able to target, threaten, implied threats, and sanction judges on an international court. So we either get rid of the UN, or we make it a democratic process where those that don't want to participate in the democratic process and the international law are ostracized and pushed to the side, and that includes the United States, Russia, China, India, any country, because the countries of the willing can have a United Nations and block any interaction to other countries that don't want to participate in international law. Yes, it's going to affect the economies for a bit, but you got to remember, folks, these emerging economies are bigger than the United States' economy once they start joining together as a united body. And united, we have strength, divided, we fall. And that's my take on it. And we have to be united now. And that unification is being shown in the battle against Russia and Ukraine. United, we stand. Divided, we fall. And the US and Russia want to divide us. And that's because both are fascist governments run by felons and guys who commit crimes. And both have been convicted of crimes. And we have to take a stand now on a world stage. And that is something we need to do and should do. And this is why. When you target judges on the international level, you've pretty well stated that it's either stand and fight or fall. And I refuse to fall.
Well, I disagree with disbanding the United Nations. I
So
think
do I. I think we need it, but I mean it has to be
but
put in place properly.
But the veto power, it goes towards the security issues more than anything else. You know, the United Nations provides vaccines, education, it provides, you know, healthcare, it provides all kinds of opportunities if it's allowed to do so. But one of the issues is, of course, the Americans in their current political climate want to cut all of that out.
They let food rot on the docks instead of giving
it's
it to
America
the
first.
starving kids. It's America first, and America should get a boot in the ass and told you're not first. You either get on board, get online with the rest of the democratic countries in the world, or we're going to quietly quit you and you're hanging on your own economy, and you can be America first because nobody wants to deal with you. And you got to remember, 77 million Americans voted for Trump to run their country into the shithole that it's in right now, and the state it is. And that says all you need to know about the U.S. mentality. And these people are not going to change that mentality, and they'll just find somebody else other than Trump later on. So we as the free world have to say this is enough is enough. If we want to safeguard the world, we have to make sure that we safeguard against even the United States stupidity. And that's where the UN comes and has to strengthen its charter and get rid of the veto power. There's enough strong countries now in the UN that they don't need to cow down to any country in the world that's having veto over others.
And you'll never guess what Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said about Rubio. Of course, there was praise, but he says this is a decisive action against the false smear campaign against the state of Israel and the IDF, and in favor of truth and justice. And you got to look at that and go,
to cover
the
up
truth,
genocide and your acts of crime. Isn't he up
like
being charged for accepting bribes and stuff? I mean, Trump obviously accepts bribes. He's got as rich as he can in 6 months. They figure he made $2 to $3 billion. How did he do that? Well, the only possibility is possibly bribes. So are we investigating for alleged bribes? And how will we ever find out? Because he can hide the money trail through his cryptocurrency, cryptocurrency was, folks, designed by some criminal mastermind to hide money transactions going across borders. And now it's legal in the Securities Commission. And guess what? It's only to move illegal money across international borders and flaunt the money system that we have in place to prevent criminals from prospering. I don't know. The world's gone to shit in the handbasket when they start allowing criminal activities all across the board, and the wealthy enjoy it because they're profiting off the stupidity of the average person.
well, it's funny how fast the news cycle goes, but you may recall that ICE arrested a judge for allegedly attempting to help one of their escape.
Yeah.
And it, I don't think it. I don't think there's any precedent for arresting judges, for escorting people out the back door.
Right.
It's appalling. And now I don't know what happened to that case. It fell off the news cycle, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things when you're prepared to arrest judges, you're prepared to threaten them.
Oh,
You're
they've
you're
been
prepared.
literally threatened left, right, and center in the U.S. I would be afraid if I was a judge down there, and I don't fear a whole hell of a lot. But
Yeah,
it's a scary proposition when these MAGA radicals are told to get you. And they're not just judges. Anybody opposing Trump is a legitimate target to this MAGA radical movement that is spawned Trump into power. I guess I find it very hilarious. The last news article, Trump was saying, "Oh, I'm going to cause peace in the Ukraine so that I can get into heaven." Buddy, if there's a heaven, you're never, ever, ever getting in. It don't matter what you do. For all the things you've done for the entirety of your life, you are never getting into heaven, buddy. That's a dream. That's just you trying to get the religious zealots saying you're such a good guy. Well, you're not. And if you're going to heaven, there's some definite answering by God he's going to have to do when I come to his door, because that's
which one?
pathetic. Yeah, there you
Which
go.
one, Corey?
Well, I'm going to hell, but
Hey,
that's because I
hey,
like it warm. I'm from Canada. It's so cold in the winters. I'll enjoy being warm for the rest of my eternity.
the Indians are having a big dispute over a temple to a monkey god at the moment.
Oh, there you go.
Uh, maybe,
Okay.
maybe they should start. Maybe they should start putting up statues of Trump in prominent places so people can throw shit at it.
Well, I mean, it's funny how all this religious base was saying that Trump was Jesus, the return of Jesus. Like, yeah, he is. Was the only return of Jesus. Who the would ever vote for this guy or allow a felon to commit crimes around the world, genocide and aiding and abetting in that? Holy Jesus, folks.
Corey, you're going
That's
to get
where
us
the
thrown
word
off the
Jesus
air.
comes in. Well, sometimes you have to take a stance. I'll have
It's
to edit
Jesus.
some of this out. So when you
It's
see
Jesus.
I edited it out because I don't want to get demonetized, but it is so frustrating dealing with the institutions that have allowed money and crime to fester and profit, and people are being pushed from middle class to all being broke peons. And you should pay attention, people, because it's only going to get worse with more power and empowerment you give these people, the worse it's going to get for you. And I guess that's what I was trying to tell Cal here is we should talk. Why does this topic mean so much to us? And why should you be paying attention to what we're trying to discuss? And that's because it does affect you in your lives, whether you realize it or not. In this case, we're talking about the undermining of laws. And if the whole legal system is undermined so that only those people with money can get so-called justice in the justice system, it can happen to you folks. You can be brought into the justice system and you will be screwed over because you turned a blind eye to conversations like this. And that empowers the criminals to get a hold of the justice system. So that's why we wanted to talk about it with you today, is that it does affect your lives and you should pay attention to world politics, local politics, as well as national politics.
If you're not paying attention, you kind of lose your right to complain. When people complain about this and that, and they complain about potholes in the road, and they complain about the education that their children are getting, and they complain about the healthcare and the lineups in the waiting room. If you're not paying attention to what's going on around you, then you really lose your authority to complain. I mean, you complain all you want, become a
Well,
Karen.
I find that most of the people that do the most complaining never voted in their life. I don't know why they justify that they can be such vocal mouthpieces when they don't even cast a vote. And I mean, here in Alberta, we're lucky if 40% of the people vote. That means 60% of the mouthpieces never voted and shouldn't have a say in anything, and they cause the problem for the rest of us because they don't vote. So that'll be another topic. But the point is, it does affect your lives, whether you see it or not. It affects your jobs. It affects your income. It affects your education. It affects your lives in general. And that's why you have to have your eyes open and start paying attention.
If it's not overly obvious when they start redrawing, districts,
Yeah,
Trump now,
gerrymandering.
well, Trump is now preparing an executive order to ban mail-in ballots and
Yeah.
outlaw voting machines. Now, you'll remember the scandal where they said the voting machines were influenced by some plot from a dead Venezuelan president, and Rudy Giuliani was made to look like a real fool and got a huge judgment against him. And Trump's lawyer, I don't even remember her name anymore, she got a judgment against her, and Giuliani got disbarred and all that because they said the voting machines, they got $1 billion judgment against them,
Yeah.
saying that the voting machines were corrupted and had an algorithm that took votes away from Trump. Now, everybody who investigated it knew that wasn't true. They gave those morons access to the ballots, and they were analyzing the ballots to see if there was Chinese bamboo paper in them. Saying that they were printed in China. And the two women that got accused of dumping a bag of ballots or whatever it was, and ended up with a good size judgment against the idiots that made that comment. They all know that there's nothing wrong with the system if the system is operated properly. But like any good dictator, they know that they gotta tilt the table.
Yeah.
They have to stay in power. If they're not in power, then sooner or later somebody's going to come after them.
Yeah. And that's why we see Trump and Rubio attacking judges, is because that's who comes after them. And they're making a preemptive strike against judges, laying down a gauntlet of threats of sanctions and maybe endangerment of their lives to push back on ever being prosecuted. So that's my take on it. I don't know if there's much more we can cover there, Cal. Maybe leave some for another episode. Any parting discussions that you want to further?
Well, it should be interesting to see who gets sanctioned next.
Are we laying some bets?
Well, I don't
my
know.
name. I'm going to get sanctioned next. Pick me.
Well, I don't have any
go to
problem.
the U.S. I have no use for the U.S. I really don't want to go to the U.S. So please sanction me. But give me an excuse never to cross that border. But yeah, so please, Trump, sanction me.
Yeah.
I'm one that judging you. I'm judging you right now.
The Rube.
And, yeah,
You gotta
and
get
Rube.
gotta get
so
the Rube
sanction
to sanction you.
Okay, well, sanction me. I've judged you. I found you wanting. I found you no morals. I found you no ethics. And I think you're part of that pedophilia group, and I think you're a sexual predator. And until proven otherwise, I guess I'm allowed to have opinions. And I think if you want to prove me wrong, all you have to do is allow the evidence from the 26 women that accused you of sexual assault, and some of those were girls. I'll leave that there and prove me wrong, Trump. I know you can't, so you're more than welcome to try. I mean, what are you going to do? Silence me with your money? Go ahead. I'm still not shutting up unless you can pay YouTube to knock me off the channel. Good luck. And hey, folks, it's possible. They can do that. So
It's
we'll
just a
catch you
switch.
later. Yeah, it's just a switch, and money and buys everything. So hand YouTube the right amount of money, and we're turned right off. On that note, give us your
Good day.
comments, what you think, and we'll try to come up with something interesting for our next conversation. Take
Bye.
care.
Subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and please share the video. Don't be afraid to share this commercial with your friends too.